The Praetorians were powerful and exerted considerable influence on political life. Fearing this power, emperors created other formations in Rome to serve as a counterweight to the Praetorians. Such formations included the cohorts of the city guard and the cohorts of the night guard. In 1977, the tomb epitaph of one Aulus Verga Mars was published, which was found in Santa Lucia, in central Italy, listing his lifetime career. During the reigns of Augustus and his successor Tiberius, Aulus Vergius served in the Praetorian Guard, first as tribune of the 11th cohort, then as tribune of the 4th cohort. The 11th number of the cohort, in which Aulus Vergius was tribune, has aroused the interest of historians, because from the words of Tacitus it is known that in the year 23 in Rome there were only 9 Praetorian cohorts. As an explanation of this fact was proposed an interesting hypothesis, which stated that at the end of the reign of Augustus, in addition to the 9 previously available Praetorian cohorts, recruited 3 new, respectively received the numbers 10, 11 and 12. Then, however, he transferred these 3 cohorts to the city prefect of Rome, after which they were called cohorts of the city guard. In memory of their origins, they retained the original numbering, as well as the structure and numbers characteristic of the other Praetorian cohorts. This hypothesis does not fit well with the previously accepted date of the origin of the cohorts of the city guard. But, strictly speaking, it does not contradict the sources available to historians. Command, hierarchy and structure. The structure of the city cohorts fully corresponded to the organization of the cohorts of the Praetorian Guard. At the head of the cohort was a tribune, subordinate to whom were 6 centurions, who headed centurions of 80 soldiers each. Tribunes of the city cohorts, as a rule, preliminarily for several years served as tribunes of one of the 7 cohorts of the night guard. In some cases, this position was given to the first centurions of the legions, who had a good record of service and noble descent. Among the tribunes of the city cohorts known to us personally, there is a considerable number of persons of the horseman class, originating from the old colonies of Roman law or Italian municipalities. If the tribune of the city cohorts coped with his duties, then after a year's service in this position, he was promoted to the tribune, who led the riders of the imperial escort, or immediately appointed tribune of one of the 10 Praetorian cohorts. Thus, this position was not attractive to aspiring candidates per se, but rather because of the further career opportunities it offered. The centurions of the city cohorts, in turn, were former centurions of the night guard cohorts or centurions of the first rank of the legions. Having served in this position for the prescribed period, they were subsequently promoted to centurions of the Praetorian Guard or transferred back to the legions with the prospect of receiving the rank of primapile. Less often we find in this position of senior soldiers from among the ordinary soldiers of urban cohorts. In order to obtain the centurionate, they had to serve the requisite terms as sergeants, as one of the principals, and then, after retiring and remaining on superannuation, as an evocate. On the contrary, evocates from the urban cohorts, like former praetorians, had a good chance of becoming centurions in one of the legions with a further prospect of continuing their careers. Composition, term of service, and salary. Persons with Roman citizenship were recruited to serve in the urban cohorts. Preference was given to Italians, but, judging by the inscriptions, the cohorts also accepted provincials and even the sons of freedmen. Under Julius Claudius, the bulk of the soldiers came from Latium, Etruria, Umbria and Cisalpine Gaul. The provincial soldiers were mostly natives of Romanized Tarraconian Spain and Narbonne Gaul, as well as Dalmatia and Norica. Some recruits were supplied by the Roman colonies of the eastern Mediterranean, Dyrrhachium, Stobae, Philippi, and Berytus. Italians were attracted by the higher wages and good career prospects in the city cohorts. A soldier who served in the cohorts for 5 years could transfer from here to the Praetorian Guard. After Septimius Severus disbanded the old Praetorian Guard and replaced it with soldiers recruited from the frontier legions, the city cohorts managed to retain their original Italian composition. The demobilization list of the soldiers of the urban cohorts shows that when veterans who were discharged entered the service, 90% of them were Italians. The natives of Latium, Umbria, and northern Italy continued to predominate, while Etruscans were marginally represented. Of the provincials, Macedonians, Norici, Dalmatians and Pannonians, as well as natives of proconsular Africa and Numidia, were noted. The term of service of the soldiers of urban cohorts was 20 years, the same as the soldiers of the legions, unlike the Praetorians, who retired after 16 years of service. At the same time, as well as in the army, retirement in the cohorts were made every 2 years, so half of the soldiers had to stay in the army for a year longer than the prescribed period. Night Guard cohorts. Another unit that was part of the Roman garrison was the Night Guard cohorts. A constant scourge of Rome were fires, which spread quickly due to the tightness of the city quarters. It was estimated that on average in the city every day there were up to 100 fires, 20 of them large and 2 very serious. To fight fires, a special committee of 3 was created, subordinate to the city aedile. It was in charge of several fire departments, recruited from public slaves and equipped with special tools. These forces were not enough, and Augustus established a special post of prefect of the Night Guard. In his subordination were given 7 cohorts of firemen on 500 people in each. In the 2nd century the number of such a cohort was brought to 1,000 people. Despite the fact that the cohorts of night guards had a military organization, initially they were not considered soldiers in the strict sense of the word. It was a paramilitary structure, like modern vigilantes, who were supposed to assist the military in related spheres of interaction. Soldiers of cohorts were recruited from the lowest strata of citizens, but because of the insufficient number of volunteers there soon began to take even freedmen and foreigners. In 24 Tiberius passed a law, according to which after 6 years of service members of the Night Guard were granted full rights of Roman citizenship. Claudius reduced this period to 3 years. Thereafter, cohorts of night guards became an organic part of the Roman military structure. The term of service for ordinary soldiers was set at 25 years, their salary, originally amounting to 150 denarii per year. Domitian increased to 300 denarii, which was 1/3 less than that received at that time soldiers in the legion. The cohorts of the Night Guard did not have their own camp. The soldiers were lodged in private houses. For their needs in different parts of the city was equipped with a number of posts for 40-50 people each. Since the time of Augustus, the urban territory of Rome was divided into 14 districts, and each cohort was responsible for 2 of them. The tasks of the Roman garrison units were clearly defined by Suetonius. They were obliged to ensure the safety of the city, while the Praetorians ensured the safety of the emperor. Thus, the city cohorts, as well as the cohorts of the Night Guard, performed mainly police functions. They served in the guardhouses set up in the most crowded places of the city, maintaining public order in the streets, dispersing rebels and rioters, arresting criminals, detaining runaway slaves or unreliable elements. A special duty of the night guard cohorts was to fight fires, for which they were equipped with axes, buggers, ladders, buckets, mats soaked in vinegar, blankets to catch people jumping from the upper floors of burning high-rise buildings, and other equipment. The cohorts were staffed by military sappers whose duty was to destroy burning buildings to prevent the fire from spreading. Each cohort had siphonary, who worked on the water pump, as well as doctors, who had to provide first aid to the injured. A less pronounced duty of the city cohorts was to act as a counterweight to the power of the Praetorians. The prefect of the night guard cohorts, Quintus Sutorius Macron, played a prominent role in the arrest and execution of the once all-powerful Praetorian prefect Lucius Aelius Sejanus. Macron replaced the guard around the Senate Curia in the Forum with a trustworthy fire guard, and in the meantime, he himself read the emperor's letter of accusation to the Senate. Here, at the Senate meeting, Sejanus was arrested, taken under escort to prison, and executed the same day. The loyalty of the Praetorians themselves was secured by the distribution to them of a large sum of money on behalf of the emperor. An interesting case occurred in 212, when the soldiers of the city cohorts, on duty in the Sacred Street, beat off a convoy of Praetorians, their former commander Lucius Fabius Chalon, arrested by order of Emperor Caracalla. When the soldiers were joined by an angry mob, the emperor himself had to leave the palace and pretend that everything was happening without his knowledge.